My daughter-in-law slipped something odd into my drink, thinking I wouldn't notice. A sweet surprise for my dearest mother-in-law, she sneered. I quietly switched it with her own mom's glass, the same woman who once called me useless. 35 minutes later. I'm Evelyn, and at 68, I thought I was beyond shocking twists, especially from family. But one evening, holding a seemingly innocent glass, I discovered a betrayal so calculated, so insidious, it made me wonder, how long had my own daughter-in-law been slowly poisoning me? You know that gut feeling? That quiet whisper that something isn't quite right? I had it the moment she handed me the glass. Her smile was a fraction too wide, too perfect, as she purred, a little treat for my favorite mother-in-law. It was syrupy sweet, but it left a sour taste in my soul. I caught a fleeting glance of anticipation in her eyes. She was waiting. So, I smiled back. And as the laughter echoed around that polished dinner table, I made an unplanned, unspoken decision. My hand moved slow, deliberate. Her glass, the one meant for me, silently found its way to her own mother. The very woman who, at a previous gathering, had so casually dismissed me as useless. I didn't say a word. I just watched and I waited. Precisely 35 minutes later, the whole atmosphere shattered. Chairs scraped back with a jarring sound. Voices rose in alarm. Faces drained of color. Someone gasped, clutching their chest. A panicked shout for help cut through the air. Through it all, I remained still, composed. My fingers wrapped around the glass that had been intended for me. The one she'd poured. The one she'd smiled about. The one I never touched. People often imagine betrayal as this dramatic explosion, right? Slamming doors, shouting matches, angry tears. But sometimes it tiptoes in, disguised as a saccharine smile, in a drink offered with a grin so flawless, it almost makes you forget to question it. Almost. Long before that fateful drink, before the silent switch, before those 35 minutes changed everything, there was just me. A woman who poured every ounce of her being into raising her only son. I wasn't born with money, no fancy degrees adorned my walls. But I had an unyielding spirit, fierce loyalty, and a quiet love that was profoundly real. When my husband passed, leaving me a widow with a 12-year-old boy, I worked 2 jobs to keep us afloat. I remember his small hands, tired but steady, helping me fold laundry late into the night. Don't worry, Mama, he'd promise, I'll take care of you one day. And I believed him. We were bound by something unbreakable. But life has a way of reshaping people so subtly you don't notice until it's far too late. He met her at a company barbecue. Bright, beautiful, with a self-assurance that commanded every room. Her laughter was infectious, her poise made her seem wise. I'll admit, at first, I wanted to like her for my son's happiness. The first time he brought her home, she praised my cooking, asked for a second helping, and called my house cozy. But the way she said cozy, it left a nagging suspicion that it was a polite euphemism for small. I tried to dismiss it, to call myself paranoid. But that faint inner voice never quite fell silent. The change in our family began like hairline fractures in a cherished face. She started correcting my son openly, in front of me. Little jokes at his expense. Then her target shifted to me. Never a direct affront, never overt enough to challenge, but the veiled criticisms were undeniable. One Christmas, she gave me wrinkle cream. It's anti-aging, she beamed. I absolutely swear by it. Another time, she offered to teach me Google Docs because you probably find that kind of stuff a struggle, don't you? I desperately wanted to believe it was generational, that I was just too sensitive. But each comment left an invisible bruise, a tiny mark no one else could see. Except, maybe, her mother. I met her mother at the engagement dinner. She arrived in a car that cost more than my entire house, barely acknowledging me, just a curt nod like I was catering staff. During dinner, she leaned across the table and asked my son, in front of everyone, "Are you absolutely certain about this?" Truly prepared to marry someone from such a humble background. A suffocating silence fell. My son gave a nervous laugh. I swallowed hard, forcing my smile to stay fixed. But in that instant, something shifted inside me. This wasn't accidental. She wasn't just rude, she was calculatingly intentional. The wedding rushed upon us. Her mother commandeered the planning. My role? A mere seat, a dress code. No input, no personal touch. It's their special day, I told myself. But my heart ached. On the morning of, I watched her mother glide through the opulent room, an air of ownership. And I watched my son, his gaze fixed on his bride, that same awe and vulnerability he used to wear bringing home spelling tests. It was then I knew, with a heavy certainty, I was losing him. Marriage naturally changes relationships, but what followed their vows wasn't natural. It was a cold, silent, methodical exile. Invitations dwindled. My texts went unread, calls unanswered. Holidays became intricate puzzles. When I did visit, her watchful eyes followed my every move, not with warmth, but with a quiet surveillance. My son started calling me Evelyn instead of Mama. Thanks for coming by, Evelyn, he'd say. Evelyn. I had become a mere visitor in the life of my own child. Still, I kept my composure, clinging to a fragile thread of hope. It was just a phase, I told myself. But with each visit, something new. Subtle digs, passive-aggressive smiles, my favorite coffee mug mysteriously disappearing. My accustomed spot on the couch suddenly too cluttered. And my son's eyes, which once met mine with such directness, now consistently avoided contact. Then came the unsettling health concerns. After meals at their house, I'd get dizzy spells, inexplicable exhaustion, a cloud of confusion. I started jotting notes, what I ate when I felt unwell. More often than not, these symptoms coincided with meals she cooked, tea she served, or drinks she poured for me. Doctors found nothing concrete. Stress, they'd suggest, perhaps age. But my gut screamed otherwise. Because while I was losing weight, losing sleep, losing a sense of myself, she was growing bolder. And her mother? Always there, perched like a queen, murmuring words I couldn't decipher, her laughter making the air around her feel colder. They were an impregnable unit, formidable, leaving me an outsider in my own family. One ordinary Sunday, at a family brunch she had insisted on hosting, it happened. She handed me a glass, lemon twist, clinking ice. A little treat for my favorite mother-in-law, she announced, her wide grin plastered across her face. My eyes scanned the room. My son was engrossed with his stepmother-in-law. No one seemed to notice us except her. She was watching, waiting, fully expecting me to drink it down. But this time I didn't. I waited. And when her back was briefly turned, I executed the switch. My gaze didn't waver. Her mother, oblivious, bragging about stock investments, picked up the glass, clinked it against her mimosa, and drank. And I waited. 35 minutes. That's all it took. 35 minutes to provide an undeniable answer to a question that had weighed on my heart for nearly 2 years. Was I imagining all of this? The wedding, looking back, was a prelude. I stood in the second row, of course, behind her mother, who insisted on walking her daughter down the aisle. No father in sight, just her, floating in head-to-toe designer. When my son watched his bride approach, I saw that familiar awe and nervousness. But he didn't glance back at me. Not once. During the vows, her mother squeezed my arm and whispered, "You should be truly grateful. This is the absolute best your son will ever achieve." No reaction. Not a flinch. I just stared straight ahead, wishing my late husband were beside me, his hand quietly holding mine, the way he always did when something felt wrong beyond words. At the reception, my place was table 6. Immediate family, table 1. I smiled politely, clapped dutifully, fought back tears when my son thanked everyone who raised me, listing his high school teacher and football coach, but never my name. I didn't utter a sound. That, I realize now, was the true beginning of my silence. But it was far from the end. Marriage didn't change her, it merely amplified her true nature. Within weeks, she called me his mom. To strangers, standing directly in front of me, she'd remark, "Oh, Evelyn?" Yes, she means well. I became an awkward explanation, an obstacle. I remember the first dinner after their honeymoon. She served me a plate and said, loud enough for everyone, "Careful, it's spicy. I know you older folks can't really handle the heat." Everyone laughed. Even my son. I laughed too, that soft, brittle kind of laugh you use to endure humiliation. She corrected me relentlessly. If I started a story, she'd interject with her polished version. If I offered advice, she'd smirk, well, actually. Everything I said was obsolete or quaint. I was systematically cast as the relic, present but irrelevant. My son? He either didn't notice or he chose not to. I'd call and she'd always answer. He's busy, tired, resting. Once I called to wish him happy birthday and she said he was on another call. She'd pass it along. I never heard back. Another afternoon, I arrived unannounced with a dish he adored. She opened the door, looked at my container and said, "Oh, how thoughtful. But we don't really do fried food anymore, you know, for gut health and all." She smiled, took it, and I never saw it again. It wasn't just her. Her mother became a constant fixture. Dinner, brunch, just because. Every time I visited, she was there, often in my customary seat, recounting stories that felt like my own, offering my son advice, slowly but surely usurping my role. Once, at a small birthday gathering, her mother produced a photo album. Baby pictures, awards, home videos. Then she looked directly at me and said, "You must regret not documenting more." These memories are absolutely priceless. I excused myself to the bathroom. I didn't cry. I simply stared at my reflection and, for the first of many times, asked myself, what am I still doing here? Then the strange things began. Small at first, forgetfulness, dizziness. I attributed it to exhaustion. But it escalated. I'd walk into a room and forget my purpose. My hands would tremble. My vision blurred while reading a recipe. My body, always so strong, now felt alien. Doctors suggested stress, menopause, grief, age. But I knew my own body. And what made it harder was her reaction. Not concern, but a stream of suggestions, supplements, teas, essential oils, a detox smoothie. One day, she handed me a pill container labeled Daily Balance and chirped, "This really helps with memory and mood. You really should too." And that inner voice, the one I had tried to dismiss, began to roar. One evening, she prepared a specialty blend tea for me, assuring me it would soothe my nerves. I took a single sip and immediately felt lightheaded. Not dizzy, but hollow, as if someone had subtly dimmed the lights inside my head. I excused myself, went home, and promptly vomited everything I had eaten. My stomach churned for hours. The next morning, I began to write it all down. Time, date, what I ate, what I drank, who prepared it, and how I felt. Meticulously tracking everything, like gathering evidence for a case I couldn't yet articulate. I told no one. Who would believe me? Who would accept that the charming daughter-in-law, who hosted Pinterest perfect dinners, volunteered at charities, and greeted me with a polite kiss, might also be slowly erasing me from the inside out? But the most agonizing part was my son. The distance wasn't just physical, it was deeply emotional. He no longer inquired about my health. He didn't notice when I stopped calling. At one point, he even suggested, maybe you should see someone. You've been acting different lately. Different. That word haunted me. He was right. I was different. Not because I had changed, but because they were systematically changing the world around me. I questioned everything, my memories, my words, my reactions. Was I truly too sensitive? Was I conjuring it all up? Or, worse, was I slowly becoming the woman they whispered about behind closed doors? The forgetful mother, the moody guest, the fading matriarch. Still, I remained silent. I smiled on cue. I nodded at unwanted advice. I played the part. But every lie has its breaking point. Every performance, an ending. And though I couldn't prove it yet, I knew with absolute certainty that I was being systematically pushed out. It wasn't a single catastrophic event. It was a multitude of small, initially unconnected details. A bottle misplaced, a name momentarily forgotten, a sudden wave of fatigue after a meal, a drink in my hand that she had poured. But there was something peculiar in the way the offers came, always in her soft, generous voice. "You must be parched. Try this. I made it myself." Or, "A little red wine helps with circulation." And every single time I accepted, I felt it. A creeping slowness behind my eyes, in my limbs. Some days, I'd simply lose hours, drifting off in the middle of conversations. I tried to tell myself I was merely tired, that age was catching up. But something deep within me resisted. And the more I dwelled on it, the more clearly I saw. I had never witnessed her pour a drink for anyone else with the same ritualistic precision. Not even for her husband, not even for her own mother. Only for me. Then there were the supplements. I'd been taking the same 3 tablets for years. I kept them in a small sealed case. One morning, opening it, I found the pills subtly altered. Same color, same shape, but with a faint, unfamiliar bitter scent. I didn't take them. The following week, I discovered 2 crushed, almost powdered, at the bottom of the bottle. I didn't confront her. I asked no questions. I simply started to watch. At family dinners, I pretended to eat, chewing slowly. I drank less. The wine remained untouched. I began to position myself closer to the kitchen door, closer to the window, closer to the exits. And I started writing. Not journaling, but documenting. A spiral-bound notebook kept in a drawer. Date, time, what I ate, what I drank, who served me, how I felt 30 minutes later, an hour after. That notebook became my second mind. I no longer fully trusted my body, but I trusted my records. I meticulously noted everything. I tracked the onset of brain fog, the initial tremor, the unexplained flushing. I compared these with days I ate alone. On those days, I was fine. I remember one Sunday she offered me chamomile tea. I accepted, but didn't sip. I just held it. I excused myself to the bathroom, poured the tea down the sink, rinsed the cup thoroughly, and brought it back empty. She smiled. Feeling better already, aren't you? And in that precise moment, I knew. It wasn't my imagination. It wasn't stress. Something was deliberately being done to me. I began to notice other unsettling things. My medications, stored in my guest room, sometimes in different positions. A foil packet, subtly ripped open. I started counting my pills after every visit, marking the back of the labels with tiny pen dots. One day, the number didn't align. 2 tablets were missing. I hadn't taken them. Someone had. Still, I held my tongue. What would I even say? That my charming daughter-in-law was drugging me? That her mother was complicit? That my son was sharing a bed with someone who might be slowly erasing me? I needed more. I needed something they couldn't explain away. So, I started taking pictures. Not of them, but of everything else. The altered pills, the food I left untouched, the drinks I poured out, the bottles I suspected had been tampered with. I placed them in sealed bags and carefully labeled each one. I didn't yet comprehend the full picture, but I was building something. Something tangible. I even began asking subtle questions, cloaked in feigned forgetfulness. Oh, I don't recall taking that vitamin, I'd inquire sweetly. Did you give it to me, dear? Her eyes would flicker, just for a second. Then she'd laugh, yes, don't worry. You always forget. Each time I pretended to be confused, she grew bolder. Each time I smiled and played the part of the absent-minded guest, she added a little more. Every time I left something untouched and returned it empty, her confidence swelled. And that revealed something profoundly important. She wasn't merely trying to make me unwell. She was trying to make me doubt myself. Trying to make others doubt me. Slowly, meticulously, she was crafting an image of me as fragile, forgetful, fading. There was one night I will never forget. A family movie night. Her mother had just arrived, uninvited. She sat beside me, glanced at my knitting bag, and commented, "Still keeping busy, I see. That's good." Idle hands are often the first sign of the mind beginning to slip. The words were casual, the tone pleasant, but I understood their true intent. Another brick in the wall they were constructing around me. A wall that, once completed, would entirely isolate me. I would become the confused mother, the unreliable narrator, the overly emotional one, the burden. But I wasn't broken. I wasn't confused. And I refused to be erased. So, I continued to play my role. I let them believe I was deteriorating. Meanwhile, I was sharpening my awareness, honing it like a blade in the dark. I began questioning my pharmacist about lab testing for supplements. I discreetly contacted an old friend of my husband's who worked in forensics. I asked him abstract questions, pretending I was researching a book on elder abuse, just to maintain a facade of safety. I was preparing for something. I didn't know exactly what, but I knew that eventually they would overstep, cross a clear, undeniable line. A line I could trace back to them in broad daylight. And when that moment arrived, I would be ready. Because no one, not her mother, not even my own son, would see it coming. The invitation arrived by text, casual, bright, far too many exclamation points. We're hosting dinner this Saturday. Just close family. Can't wait to see you, Evelyn. I stared at it. I understood its real meaning. These dinners were no longer about family. They were about performance, about control, about ensuring I remained confined to the compliant, diminished role they had assigned me. I didn't reply immediately. I waited until the next morning, then typed a simple, looking forward to it. No emojis, no warmth. Just the predictable, harmless answer they expected. But I wasn't arriving empty-handed. That evening, I carried more than my purse. I carried my meticulous records, my simmering suspicions, my newfound stillness, my strategic silence. The house was immaculate, almost surgically perfect. Every napkin folded, every fork aligned. Her mother was already there, perched at the kitchen island like a queen, swirling red wine, making pronouncements about the ambience. I greeted them with the practiced smile I'd perfected, outwardly warm, hollow beneath. My son offered a distracted side hug. She kissed my cheek. Her mother's compliment sounded more like a veiled threat. You look well, Evelyn, much better than last time. Must be all the rest you're getting. I simply nodded and placed the apple crisp I'd brought, her least favorite, on the counter. I knew she wouldn't touch it. Dinner unfolded as always, forced laughter, stilted small talk. Her mother lectured on real estate. She waxed poetic about renovations. My son sat quietly, occasionally glancing at his phone. I took small, cautious bites, eating only what I served myself. And then it happened. After the plates were cleared, she rose and announced, "I've made something truly special for tonight, just for you, Evelyn." She delivered the line as if offering a priceless gift. She turned to the bar cart, beginning to prepare drinks with a practiced, almost theatrical elegance, ice clinking, citrus slices falling, stirring with meticulous care. My eyes tracked every movement. When she returned, she presented me with a tall, clear glass containing a pale pink liquid with something floating delicately within. Rosemary, perhaps, or mint. She placed it directly in front of me and smiled. "This one's special for you. My own recipe. You're going to adore it." I met her gaze, and I smiled back. A different kind of smile this time, one I hadn't worn in a very long while. Not warm, not grateful, just utterly still. "Thank you, dear," I said, lifting the glass slightly, but not drinking. I set it back down. I glanced at my son. He didn't look up. I waited for a moment of collective distraction, a subtle pause in their orchestrated rhythm. And when it came, when her mother stood to adjust the thermostat and she turned to follow her with her eyes, I acted. Calmly. Quietly. I reached forward, took her mother's identical glass, and seamlessly, effortlessly, swapped them. My glass for hers. No one noticed. They never did. The glasses sat there, appearing as if nothing had changed. But everything had. I returned to my seat, folded my hands in my lap, and waited. No fear, only a quiet, resolute clarity. I watched her mother sip, just as she always did, with an air of delicate greed. I watched my daughter-in-law glance at me, then at the glass. I smiled again. This time, I saw a fleeting flicker of confusion behind her eyes. Small, subtle, but undeniably there. And in the silent chamber of my mind, I spoke the words I couldn't utter aloud. If I'm wrong, nothing happens. If I'm right, we'll all see. 35 minutes. I knew the pattern. I tracked the clock without overtly looking at it. I engaged in light conversation, asking her mother about her new marble countertops, complimenting the lighting. I played my role perfectly, but beneath it all, I was listening for the shift. The first sign, a sudden pause in her mother's sentence. She was Mid-description of her elaborate wine cellar remodel when she blinked twice, touched her forehead, and her voice slurred, just enough for my son to finally look up. She cleared her throat, laughed it off. "Must be the wine," she said, even though her glass was only half empty. Her daughter leaned forward slightly, her smile still not quite reaching her eyes. Another 5 minutes passed. Her mother's face flushed a deep, alarming red. She reached for her water glass, her hand visibly trembling. My son stood up. "Are you okay?" he asked, a tremor in his voice. She nodded quickly, too quickly, then mumbled something about the room spinning. Her words became disjointed, tumbling over each other like marbles down a stair. Then came the final, undeniable moment. Her hand gripped the table's edge, knuckles white. She looked at me. Not at her daughter. Not at her son-in-law. At me. And I met her gaze. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I didn't flinch. I simply held her frantic stare as panic slowly bloomed in her eyes. She stood abruptly, or tried to. The chair scraped back with a violent shriek. She stumbled sideways, knocking over her glass. My son rushed to her side. My daughter-in-law froze, utterly still. Frantic voices erupted around us. My son called her name. His wife fumbled for her phone. A bitter, acrid smell rose from the spilled drink. But I remained seated still, watching. The way I had watched for months, the way I had learned to patiently wait. Paramedics arrived within minutes. Questions started, and all I offered was, "I don't know what happened. She seemed fine just a moment ago." No one asked about the drink. Not yet. But I knew it wouldn't be long. As they carried her mother out on a stretcher, my daughter-in-law's eyes met mine. For the very first time, she looked at me as if she didn't know who I was, as if she had been looking at a ghost all this time. And now, only now, she was truly seeing the woman behind the silence. I lifted my glass, the one that had been intended for me, still full, still untouched. And I whispered to myself, how peculiar. It seems I just wasn't thirsty this evening. The EMT took the glass from my hand. He sniffed it, examined it closely, and then immediately bagged it. I saw the precise moment her confidence shattered. The way her shoulders stiffened, her lips pressed into a thin, pale line, her eyes beginning to calculate. Within the hour, the police arrived. A young officer, calm and professional, requested statements. I was ready. I handed him my notebook, the one I had kept hidden for months. He raised an eyebrow as I explained its purpose. He took it without argument, reading a few pages. His expression remained neutral, but his tone shifted. They collected the drink, the glass, my vitamin bottle, the supplements. My daughter-in-law protested. "You don't think we? Come on. This is insane." "It's just protocol, ma'am," the officer replied. "We have to rule everything out." The room felt cold. My son stood in the hallway, silent, ashen. He looked between me and his wife as if seeing two strangers. And perhaps, in a way, he was. Then she said it, her voice rising, eyes wide with incredulity. She switched the drinks. She must have done it. She must have. Why else would she even mention it? There it was. The desperate twist. The counter-narrative she was ready to spin. That I was the unstable one. But it came too quickly, too rehearsed, too loud. The officer didn't blink, simply wrote it down. "So, you're saying she tampered with your mother's drink?" "Yes," she blurted, then faltered. "No, I mean, she must have." I gave her the other glass. I turned towards them, my voice steady. "You handed me the drink. You said it was special. I didn't drink it. I switched it with your mother's. She drank it." The silence that followed was thick, suffocating. "Why would I do that?" she demanded. I held her gaze. "That's what they're going to find out." That night ended with her pacing by the kitchen window. My son said very little. The police took what they needed, and I went home, quietly, slowly, my hands, the same hands that once rocked my baby boy to sleep, now clutching the proof he had once promised to protect. I didn't sleep that night, not from fear, but from a profound certainty. Something dark had been steadily growing around me, and I had finally reached its roots. Let them dig. Let the lab tests return. Let the lies unravel themselves. I was ready for the truth to emerge, even if it tore my family apart, because the worst had already been done, and I had endured it in silence. Now, the silence was theirs to bear. Truth doesn't always erupt in a moment of chaos. Sometimes it arrives slowly, gently, like a letter sliding beneath your door. Other times, it stands quietly in the corner of a room, waiting for someone to finally meet its gaze and acknowledge, yes, I see you now. 2 days after the incident, the detective called. His voice was steady, measured. We'd like to speak with you again, Mrs. Hamilton. At your convenience. I agreed to come in the following morning. I brought the journals, every page spiral-bound, dated, documented. I handed them over without hesitation. I allowed them to pore over my notes, my observations, my lists of symptoms. I explained the food, the drinks, the pills, the switch. And then I sat in silence as they asked questions I had spent months preparing to answer. Why didn't you say anything earlier? Because no one would have believed me. How long have you suspected she was drugging you? Long enough to be certain. And the drink? Why did you switch it? Because I needed to know if it was real or if I was truly losing myself, just as they wanted me to believe. They listened intently, took notes, and asked permission to test the remaining pills in the bottle I had brought. I granted it willingly. The toxicology results returned in less than a week. The drink, the one meant for me, contained a benzodiazepine derivative, a powerful sedative. In high doses, it induces confusion, dizziness, memory loss, and mixed with alcohol, the effects are significantly more severe. They found trace amounts of the very same compound in the supplements I'd saved, from the vitamin bottle she had once handed me, smiling. The officer didn't say much when he called to inform me. You were right to be suspicious, Mrs. Hamilton. This is being taken very seriously. What transpired next didn't occur in front of me. I wasn't present when they interrogated her. I wasn't there when she finally broke, when the perfectly polished daughter-in-law cracked under the weight of her own deceptions. But I read the report. She confessed. Not all at once, but in fragments. She claimed she merely wanted me to rest more, that I was always on edge, that she thought a little calm would do me good. But when questioned why she never disclosed the pills, why she added them to my drink without consent, why she had offered to manage my prescriptions and medical renewals, her carefully constructed answers began to unravel. She and her mother had been orchestrating something for over a year. I didn't grasp the full extent until investigators meticulously walked me through it. They had systematically documented my behavior, recording moments when I forgot words, when I repeated myself, when I seemed confused. These, they confirmed, were the days I was drugged. They had painstakingly collected these instances, preparing a case to petition for guardianship, not for my benefit, but for control. Control of what? Of my husband's estate, the retirement properties, the vintage cars, the antique collection, the trust funds we had built together over decades. There were emails, messages, records of meetings with lawyers. Her mother had suggested I might need assisted living soon, citing signs of cognitive decline, and implying it was perhaps time for a family member to help manage my assets. It wasn't about helping me. It was about legally, permanently, and quietly removing me. They didn't want me gone, not precisely. They wanted me silenced, tucked away somewhere with soft walls and a nurse. Somewhere they could visit once a month, bring flowers, feign love and concern, while systematically draining everything my husband and I had built with our bare hands. My son claimed he didn't know. And perhaps he didn't. Perhaps he believed her when she said I was slipping. Perhaps it was easier for him to believe I was fading than to admit the woman he married was orchestrating my disappearance in plain sight. When they confronted him with the evidence, the pills, the journals, the confession, he remained silent for nearly 5 minutes. The detective told me he cried. Not for her, but for what he had allowed to happen. And her mother? She recovered after a brief hospital stay. When informed of what had been found, she denied everything, claimed I had poisoned her. But the lab results didn't lie. She hadn't been poisoned by a stranger. She had swallowed the very plan she helped devise. Charges were filed. They're still moving through the system now. Legal wheels turn slowly. But I don't need the official outcome to validate what I know in my bones. They tried to erase me. Gently. elegantly. With small doses, with carefully crafted conversations, with smiles that thinly veiled their hunger. But they overlooked something crucial about me. I have survived war, endured childbirth, navigated profound grief, and built a home from nothing but raw hands and an unyielding will. I've buried friends, raised a son, paid off a mortgage, and stood tall when my husband died peacefully beside me. You don't quietly erase a woman like that. You don't underestimate her memory, her patience, her fierce devotion to the truth. You don't dismiss her as fragile and expect her to simply fold. They had a plan, and I had time. They had secrets, and I had a notebook. They had control until the precise moment I chose to reclaim it. And when I did, I didn't raise my voice. I didn't scream. I didn't throw a tantrum. I simply lifted the glass that was meant to erase me and allowed someone else to drink the insidious lie they had poured. That was my justice. And the genesis of their undoing. He came to my house 2 days after the news broke. No warning, he simply appeared on my porch. He looked smaller than I remembered, like a boy who had outgrown his armor. I opened the door but said nothing. He sat in the chair his father used to favor, rubbing his palms against his jeans. Then he spoke. "She didn't mean to hurt you, Mom. You have to believe that." I didn't answer right away. I just looked at him, truly looked at him, and for the first time, I couldn't recognize the child I had raised. He continued, asserting it was all a misunderstanding, that she thought I was struggling, that it was never about the money, never about removing me. And I listened. I listened to every word, because I needed to discern if any of them carried the ring of truth, or if they were merely echoes of the same lie she had been feeding him for years. When he finished, he looked at me, expecting forgiveness, or perhaps a way out. And all I said was, "She drugged me, Matthew." His face fell, as if he believed I wouldn't voice it aloud. "She didn't mean to," he repeated. And then I stood, walked slowly to the fireplace where his baby photo still sat on the mantel, his tiny feet dangling over the edge of a miniature red wagon, his hand clutching my thumb as if it were his entire world. I picked up that frame and gently turned it around, face down. He watched me do it. I told him I wasn't angry. Not anymore. Just tired. Tired of begging to be believed. Tired of sitting at dinner tables where poison wore perfume. Tired of smiling at people who would rather see me buried than bold. I said, sometimes love blinds us and sometimes love forgets us. He didn't respond. He simply stared at the floor. When he finally rose to leave, he hesitated at the door. "Will you come to the hearing?" he asked. I shook my head. "No. I've already lived it." He left without embracing me, without a backward glance. And I stood at the window, watching his car vanish down the street that once brought him home for Christmas. The street I used to shovel so he could ride his bike. The one he used to run down barefoot when he was late for dinner. The one I never imagined would carry him away from me like this. That night, I packed 2 bags, essentials only. By morning, I was gone. I told no one where I was headed. I just drove. Past the city, past the courthouse, past the memory of my son's face at the door. I found a small town by the coast. Quiet, sunlit, seemingly oblivious to the past. I rented a modest cottage with chipped paint and ivy adorning the porch. The kind of place where neighbors wave but keep walking. Where the past doesn't follow you inside. I planted herbs in the backyard, basil, rosemary. Every time I watered them, I remembered the drink she made for me. And every time I watched them grow, I remembered that I had survived it. I found peace in the simplest things. Warm bread, the radio softly playing, the gentle sound of rain against the tin roof. I found strength in silence. Real silence. Not the kind I once had to bite down on, but the kind that enveloped me like a mother's embrace. A silence that demanded no performance, no explanations, no apologies. I didn't block my son's number, but I didn't answer his messages either. He texted once every few weeks. Mostly short phrases. "Thinking of you. Hope you're okay. I'm sorry." But not once did he say he believed me. Not once did he say he had left her. So, I remained gone. Because forgiveness isn't always a door you swing open wide. Sometimes, it's a door you close gently, quietly, and walk away from with the keys still in your pocket. And in that little cottage by the sea, with salt in the air and a new name on the mailbox, I meticulously rebuilt a life no one could poison. Not her. Not her mother. Not even the son I once believed would protect me. Sometimes, to save yourself, you don't need to fight. You just need to walk away before they convince you you're not worth saving. And that's precisely what I did. They say revenge is loud, explosive, public. But that's only because they've never witnessed the true power of silence, what patience can meticulously carve, what a quiet woman, armed with time and truth, can construct beneath the surface. Brick by brick. Until the day she no longer needs to utter a single word to be profoundly heard. I didn't speak to my son for nearly a year after I left. He didn't come looking for me, and I didn't expect him to. But during that year, I made decisions, intentional ones, with the same calm precision I used to slice onions or sort laundry. Quiet, steady motions shaping the future without ever raising my voice. The first thing I did was contact my lawyer, Arthur. He had been with our family since my husband and I bought our first home. He knew us when we had nothing. Now, I asked him to help me rewrite my will. We sat in his small office. I told him everything. I showed him my journals, my statements, the police reports. He didn't flinch. He just nodded slowly, then picked up his pen. I removed them both. My son, my daughter-in-law. Every clause, every cent, their names excised with an ink so sharp it felt like a scalpel. It wasn't born of vindictiveness. It felt clean, necessary, like severing rot. But I didn't stop there. I asked Arthur to earmark a significant portion of the estate, the part my husband and I had once set aside for family legacy, and donate it. Not just anywhere, but to the causes my husband held dear. A veteran shelter. A scholarship for young mechanics. A program that restored old military jeeps and gifted them to museums. My husband believed in hard work, in second chances, in helping quietly. So that's where I directed the money, to places that still carried the imprint of his spirit. The remainder of everything we had painstakingly built, I bequeathed to my granddaughter. She's only 6 now. But she once climbed onto my lap and whispered, "Grandma, your hugs make my heart stop hurting." That's all the clarity I needed. She was still untouched, still good. But I didn't leave it to her blindly. I established a trust, one that would be released to her on her 25th birthday, if and only if her father and mother held no legal or financial control over her life. A clause that couldn't be challenged. And then I composed the letter. Longhand. No computers, just ink and paper. It began with the unvarnished truth, every line of it. I wrote about the drinks, the dinners, the silent months of creeping confusion. The precise moment I realized I was being erased with kindness. I wrote about the switch, the agonizing 35-minute wait, her mother's collapse across the table while I sat, hands folded, finally watching the lie crumble. I didn't dramatize it. I didn't infuse it with bitterness. I simply recounted it as it happened, with the kind of crystalline clarity only a survivor truly earns. I wrote that I forgave them, not for their benefit, but for my own. I forgave them, and then I released them. I also wrote to my granddaughter. I told her that being a woman in this world sometimes means learning when to speak, when to remain silent, and when to simply walk away without needing to explain a single thing. I told her that family is meant to protect you, but when they fail, you possess every right to protect yourself. I sealed the letter in an envelope, entrusted it to Arthur with strict instructions, to be opened the day I pass. Not before. Not after. That was my justice. Not headlines, not prison sentences, just paper and truth and time. No one would know until it was too late for them to undo it. And when the day finally arrives, years from now, and they open that envelope, expecting something soft, something sentimental, they'll instead find the entire story they tried to bury, staring back at them in my own handwriting. That's the nature of silent retribution. It doesn't scream. It waits. It outlives the lies. It survives the spin. It sits quietly in a drawer, knowing that one day the truth will arrive, wearing my voice, and there won't be a single thing they can do to stop it. And in that moment, whether I'm still breathing or merely a photograph on a mantle, they will know I never needed to shout to win. Time passes, whether you chase it or not, whether you're ready or not, whether you're broken, healing, or standing perfectly still. 3 years slipped by quietly, just seasons changing outside my cottage window. Birds came and went, waves crashed like clockwork. And slowly, gently, the ache I carried began to dissolve. Not because the hurt vanished, but because I finally stopped needing it to make sense. I found a new rhythm in the ordinary. I started volunteering at a small community center. Nothing grand, just a 2-room building, but it radiated warmth. Genuine warmth. We hosted free art classes for children, soup nights, book swaps. I'd sit and listen to people's stories, help them fill out forms, teach the elderly how to navigate email. And no one there knew me as a mother-in-law, or a mother, or the woman who almost lost everything over a cocktail. I was simply Miss N. They didn't know my past, and I didn't offer it. I wasn't hiding. I had simply outgrown the need to be viewed through the lens of pain. I had other things to do. But life, in its cyclical way, always circles back. Truth has its own timeline. And one day, it came knocking. It began as a whisper. A neighbor mentioned that a woman matching my daughter-in-law's mother's description had been admitted to a private care facility a few towns over. Failing kidneys, chronic confusion. Some said early dementia, others a stress-related collapse. No visitors, just silence. I didn't gloat. I didn't dance in triumph. I just poured myself a cup of tea and sat by the window for a long time, because I remembered something my husband once told me: the ground always levels itself. Sooner or later, it all evens out. A few weeks later, the second wave arrived. My son. He appeared at the community center just after closing. I almost didn't recognize him. More gray in his beard, less weight in his voice. His hands trembled slightly when he tucked them into his pockets. "Mom," he said. Just that. As if it were the first word in a language he hadn't spoken in years. I didn't rush to hug him. I didn't collapse into tears. I just nodded once, quietly, and gestured towards a bench outside. We sat in silence for a while. Then he spoke. "She's gone. She left. Took the car, the savings, everything. It was all a lie, Mom. Not just what she did to you. Everything. I found bank transfers, fake business filings, credit cards in my name. I don't even know who she is anymore." I waited. I let him speak because I wasn't going to carry his guilt for him. Not this time. "I'm so sorry," he said, and this time, his voice cracked. The kind that emanates from the bones, from shame finally finding its way out. I looked at him long and hard, and I yearned to say so many things. I wanted to ask where he was when I needed someone to believe me. I wanted to ask how many nights I had sat by the window, wondering where my son had gone. But instead, I asked, why now? He looked down at his hands, then said something I'll never forget, because the silence finally grew louder than the lie. He asked about the will. Said he wanted to fix things. Said he didn't care about the money anymore. He just wanted us to be okay. And I told him the truth, not out of spite, but because he deserved to inhabit the reality he had helped create. The will was changed, Matthew. Years ago. You're not in it. Neither is she. He blinked once, twice, but he didn't argue. He just nodded slowly, like a man walking through a thick fog and finally discerning the outline of a cliff he had once refused to believe was there. I told him about the charities, about the scholarship, about the community center. And then I told him about his daughter, that her inheritance was safely locked away, that she would never fall under their control, that I had left her a letter she would read someday. He asked if he could read it. I said no, because that letter wasn't for him. He had already read a different version of the story. He didn't get to rewrite it now. He just had to live with it. He stood to leave, then hesitated. Do you think she'll forgive me someday? I didn't answer that question, because it wasn't mine to answer. Forgiveness is never something you can schedule or demand. It arrives when it wants to or not at all. As he walked away, I looked up at the sky. Soft pink clouds stretched across the horizon. A breeze moved through the trees like a hymn. And I felt it. That stillness, that profound peace that only comes after fire, after loss, after being burned down to nothing and rebuilding something quiet, strong, and entirely your own. 3 years ago, I was almost erased by the people I loved most. But today, I run a center where strangers feel safe enough to cry in front of me. Where children laugh with paint on their fingers. Where no one has to earn the right to be believed. I lost a son, but I found myself. I buried the past. And in its place, I planted something that will not rot. And that is enough. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't scream in courtrooms or beg to be heard over dinner tables that had long forgotten what it meant to be sacred. I didn't smash windows or throw plates. I didn't storm out of rooms. I simply stepped back. I allowed the silence to speak. I let the truth settle like dust on every surface they tried to polish with lies. I watched time stretch its arms and do what it always does, reveal. Because the thing about time is, it doesn't hide things forever. It doesn't protect a deceit, no matter how cleverly disguised. And it doesn't reward manipulation. Time may be slow, but it is faithful. And when you trust it, when you stop chasing justice and start embodying it, something changes. You rise and they shrink. I rebuilt quietly, thoughtfully. I cut ties not out of spite, but out of self-respect. I changed my will, not in vengeance, but in absolute clarity. I poured what was once pain into places where it could bloom. I left seeds behind, not so they'd remember me, but so they'd never forget themselves. In the end, they lost more than money. They lost access. They lost legacy. They lost the right to stand in the shade of the very tree they tried to chop down. And me? I gained everything I almost lost. Myself, my voice, my peace. I didn't scream. I didn't fight dirty. I didn't play their game. I just stood still. Have you ever had to choose between fighting and walking away? Tell me your story in the comments below. I really want to know what you think.